Cassius Clay has got a lot of ability, but he's not the greatest. He's a guy with $1 million worth of confidence and $1 worth of courage. I could have whipped him. In all my honesty, I feel it in my bones. See, Clay can be clobbered, and if you're pardoning old-timer talking, I am certain I know how. These days, I get to the fights in most parts of the world, especially when Clay is defending my old heavyweight title. You see, we kid around in training camps a little, and Clay makes speeches and goes into his act telling folks how he would have fought Joe Louis. I play along. It don't harm nobody. Maybe helps with the action, puts a few dollars on the tape. Fellas come up, asking for autographs, that kind of thing, and tell me I could have lit Clay with an Empire State Building tied to my feet. I don't say anything. But a man gets started sitting there watching Clay. I see him fooling in the gym, and I've seen nearly all of his fights. Way back in Louisville, to Cleveland Williams in Houston. Sometimes Clay fights good, and sometimes he pulls stunts that should get his head knocked off if the other guy knew his trade, like they made me learn mine. Trouble with Clay, he thinks he knows it all, fights with his mouth. He won't listen. Me, first thing I learned in the fight game was to keep my trap shut and my ears wide open, especially when my wise old trainer, Chumpy Blackburn, was telling me things for my own good. We did all right. Seems like I won a championship, so maybe I'm entitled to speak up a word or two of truth after all these years. And the truth in my book is I'm sure I could have put Clay away, and I also know how. Clay says he's got the fastest hands and fastest feet of any heavyweight who was ever born. That's his opinion, and he's entitled to it. The kid has speed. It can surely box when he has to. There's nobody around to outbox him, and the opponent who tries is in his grave, especially in the center of the ring. With room to move, Clay is a champion, real dangerous. But he doesn't know a thing about fighting on the ropes, you see, which is where he would be if he were in there with me. He's all confused, his feet in knots, and his body wide open to everything. I didn't see him and Cooper put Clay down in their first fight in London, but I like to bet Clay was coming off the ropes when he got caught with that left hook. I certainly saw that German southpaw, Mildenberger, bang him good in the corner, and that was when Mildenberger had been battered into a hopeless, beat-up Hulk in the 10th round. Clay, he did not appreciate that punch one bit, but if Mildenberger had known enough to send it over when he was fresh, I figured Clay would have appreciated a whole lot less. Sure, Clay's got fancy feet in the middle of the ring, faster even than Billy Conn and Bob Pastor, two of the quickest men who ever gave me the runaround till I caught up. But Clay wastes his footwork, stumbling around like Conn and Pastor never did, from where I was looking. There's a couple other things about Clay. He drops his left hand when he should be protecting that pretty face he's always talking about. Doing a forward thing like that in a championship fight, he could end up looking like a meat wagon, or maybe riding in one. Dropping your left hand ain't healthy. It was a weakness of mine till Max Mellon taught me the hard way in our first fight. If I was fighting Clay, I would start licking him at least 5 weeks before the bell, right in training camp, someplace like my old stand at Pompton Lakes. There wouldn't be too much of the fancy fixes and showbiz routines they give you in the gymnasiums these days, but there sure would be some murder going on. I never fooled around in workouts. I would pay top wages for the 5 fastest sparring partners I could buy. I would need quick targets to speed up my hands for a fast opponent like Clay, and I would feel real sorry for the boys by the time we were through. Clay had his own ideas about sparring. Me too. There would be no horsing around. I never did pull punches for spar mates. Fighting was my business, and a man shouldn't play games in business hours. If I were training to whip Clay, my partners would go home bruised and busted up around the body, even from big gloves. Anyone who couldn't take it would be out, long before the fight. And if I was bossing camp, I'd aim to be bossing the ring too, where the gloves come smaller. Any man who fights Clay's fight is crazy. With me, Clay would have to fight a Joe Louis fight, my way, all the way, which means I would go in to outpunch him rather than try to outbox him. I once thought I could keep over Billy Conn, and for a long time, it didn't take. I like to see to it that Clay did not stay ring center. Out there, I could be the patsy on the wrong end of the punishment. No, He'd be hitting to those ropes as near a corner as I could get him. Some place where, from all I've seen, he just does not know how to fight. If he stayed on the ropes, he'd get hurt. Sooner or later, he'd try to bounce off, and when he did, he would get hurt more. That's what the fight game is all about. I'd press him, bang him around, claw him, clobber him with all I had, cut down his speed, belt him around the ribs. I'd punish the body where the pain comes real bad. I know. I can still feel the trip hammers Rocky Marciano hit me with when he knocked me out when he was on his way up and I was on my way out. Clay would have felt welts on his body like I did. He would ache like I did. His mouth was shut tight against the pain, and there would be tears burning his eyes. It is not very funny being under fire from body punches, and it wouldn't help Clay any further looking for his trainer Angelo Dundee to come riding into the ring with the rescue posse. Those guys come in the corner fight real good during the intervals, but they can't give you any more fist or any more heart with some guys caving your ribs in. Kill the body, and the head will die. Chapper used to tell me that. It figures. Sooner or later, I think Clay would get the message. Get it so good he'd start worrying about that face of his and drop his left hand like he did against Mildenberger and George Travalo. Those fellas got their openers by accident and then fouled them up. I would work for it, and I wouldn't reckon to miss it when it arrived. If I goofed with a world title and $1 million or so in the pot, then I would not have any right to be in there with a smart fighter like Cassius Clay. But only smart so far. Clay coming out of a corner all confused, busted up from body punches, would be a sucker for any opponent waiting for him with a shot in the locker. I'd be waiting, ready with something hot. I haven't got around to figuring out what kind of punch I send in for the payroll, but I learned several in my day. A one-punch fighter is only half a fighter, you see. Take away his hammer and he's nothing. You have to be properly equipped. When I won my title from Jim Braddock, I cut Jim's lip with a left hook, but that was only by way of preparation for the payoff. When his legs began to wobble, I put my whole body behind him right to the jaw, and Jim dropped on his face for goodbye. Maybe I could hit Clay with that kind of right. It takes all sorts, like in my second fight with Max Mailing. A right to the jaw gave Max a 3 count. He took 2 more from a 1-2 combination. Then I threw a straight left jab and a right cross for keeps. But all these counts started from a right to the ribs after Max had bounced off the ropes with his legs in a mess. Now, I owed Max a thing or two. After he beat me 2 years earlier, I spent lots of time studying his style before I discovered he was a sucker for a left jab. I honestly feel I could have turned the same kind of trick against Clay, but my feelings don't predict which round. Only poets go around predicting. I was prepared to travel all the way against Smelling, but I got my chance to tag him and won. I was hoping for a quick kill in my first fight with Billy Conn on the New York Polo Grounds, but I came in too light, and Billy breezed along so fast he nearly took my title. Too bad he finally decided to slug it out, like I hoped he would, and got his face all mixed up with my right hand in the 13th. If I was fighting Clay, I would aim to be ready with a big one anytime, from round 1 to round 15. In London, and in most other places I go, people always ask me how Clay would have come through against my old opponents, and we kick the thing around, arguing this way and that. I think Joe Walcott would have out-generalized him. Clay is faster, but old Joe had a better style and better brains. When he dropped the left, it wasn't a mistake. It was to feint you onto a right hand that could bring the root down on your head. Billy Conn was like lightning. He learned his trade in the small clubs, from welter right up to heavyweight. He could have kept up with Clay because his legs knew where they were going. Only thing is, Clay and Conn would have been running away from each other so fast that there would have been no fight. Clay, I think, would have hit too fast for Jim Braddock and would have had too many moves for Max there. Maxie packed a punch, but never paid enough attention to learning his business the hard way, in camp and around the clubs. Smelling could have taken Clay with his right, same way he took me when I forgot to keep my left up after I jabbed with it in our first fight. But of all my old opponents, the one to give Clay the worst time would have been Rocky Marciano. But Rod didn't know much about the boxing book, but it wasn't a book he hit me with. It was a whole library of bone crushers. If Marciano caught up with him, I figured Clay would get discouraged and start looking for Angelo Dundee to cut the gloves off. Nobody ever beat Marciano, and I was wrong when I thought I was still young enough to know how. I could be wrong about Clay as well, but it's good to forget the calendar once in a while and dream up ways of whipping the man who wears your old crown. Once I happened to walk along when Clay was hollering, "I am the greatest," to some fellas outside the Teresa Hotel in Harlem. When he saw me, Clay came over and shouted to the crowd, "This is Joe Louis. We is the greatest." That was nice. Cassius Clay is a nice boy and a smart fighter, but I'm sure Joe Louis could have licked him.
Man, Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe will tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, Clay, during one time during my career, I went on a Bum of the Month tour.
Bum of the month? I would have been a bum compared to you.
Well, you've been on the tour.
Oh, man.